All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a profoundly different, highly spiritual way to look at the exhausting and often completely heartbreaking reality of nursing and caregiving. Look, if you've ever had to care for an aging parent or a sick loved one, you know exactly how impossibly heavy that responsibility can feel. But we're going to explore a perspective today that completely flips that narrative on its head, turning what feels like an unfair burden into, well, an absolutely extraordinary opportunity. But before we get into the text's incredibly uplifting solutions, we really have to acknowledge the reality on the ground: the intense physical burnout, the deep, agonizing sorrow families experience when they're watching someone they love decline. It forces us to ask this question: is caregiving really just a draining physical burden, or is there something profoundly deeper going on? Because it's so easy to get totally bogged down in the day-to-day grind, right? The medications, the sleepless nights, watching them physically deteriorate. It literally drains the life out of you. But our source materials suggest that if we stop at just that physical level, we are completely missing the entire point of the experience. To figure out what we're missing, we're drawing directly from this fascinating source text today called The True Relationship Between the Mind and Body. This book dives deep into the spiritual realities that, frankly, modern medicine just doesn't account for. And it specifically focuses on how shifting our understanding of our spiritual nature completely transforms how we care for the sick and the elderly. So the crucial point the source makes right out of the gate is this stark contrast between the bleak physical reality of illness and the highly empowering spiritual reality. I mean, on the physical side, what do we see? Inevitable decay, an exhausting burden, and ultimately despair. But the spiritual view, it completely reframes that exact same situation. It sees the individual as a soul in training. It views caregiving not as an energy drain, but as a chance to literally infuse life force into someone. Fundamentally, it defines it as the ultimate practice of true love. And this dichotomy is kind of the foundation for everything we're about to cover. Now, when we get into Chapter 3, which is all about nursing and caregiving, the text reveals something amazing. Since humans are primarily spiritual beings, the words we speak to the sick aren't just empty sounds. They are an actual, tangible life force that we pour directly into their minds. When you're sitting next to a hospital bed, it is so easy to speak out of fear or sadness. But the source material explains that our bodies react deeply to the actions of the mind. Because we are spiritual beings at our core, our words carry immense power. They are quite literally a life force. So what does this mean for you, the caregiver? According to Chapter 3, you must systematically avoid fearful language. When caring for the sick, one should not incite anxiety, but rather offer hopeful, bright words to infuse them with life force. If a doctor or a relative is constantly standing around saying, "Oh, you only have 3 months to live," everyone internalizes that, and the physical body literally follows that despair. But if you consciously recognize the patient as a spiritual being and intentionally offer bright, positive words, you can literally bring the color back to their face. You inject a life force that boosts their own natural healing power. You are actively participating in their recovery just by the tone of your voice. How wild is that? Okay, moving on to Section 1, the truth of dementia, the perfect soul inside the failing machine. This brings us to one of the most emotionally devastating aspects of aging: cognitive decline. Regarding elderly individuals with dementia, the text offers an incredibly comforting metaphor. It explains that while the physical body deteriorates, the soul remains completely unharmed. Yes, the human body is basically a machine, and in the late stages of life, parts of it, like brain function, stop working smoothly. But the soul? The soul does not get dementia. The soul does not age. The spiritual self inside that failing physical machine is perfectly intact. They can hear and they can feel everything happening around them, even if they cannot physically articulate it to you anymore. Because of this, the author gives us a really sobering warning. Quote, "Spiritually, they are perfect. The possibility that the soul hears the bad-mouthing is high, so it is better to watch your words." You know, people often speak so carelessly around those with dementia, assuming they just don't understand what's going on. But spiritually, they are picking up on all those thoughts and words. They don't need physical ears to hear you. In fact, inside, they are often agonizing and apologizing to their family for being a burden. So it is absolutely crucial to maintain deep respect, remembering you're interacting with a fully aware spirit. And to offer some comfort, the text uses this gorgeous imagery to describe death. It's not an end, but rather the soul finally leaving its heavy, broken physical shell to return to its perfect spiritual form. Imagine the unbelievable relief of taking off a heavy, restrictive suit that you've been trapped in for years. The source says that when someone who has been bedridden or suffering from severe dementia finally crosses over, the feeling of liberation is exactly like a cicada leaving its shell behind. They step right out of that limitation and feel incredibly light, completely free, and profoundly happy. Let's move to section 2, the ultimate paradigm shift, caregiving as a training ground. So we've talked a lot about the patient's journey, but what about the family? What about you, the exhausted caregiver? Well, instead of seeing caregiving as some sort of unfair cosmic punishment, the text defines nursing and caregiving as a spiritual training ground, specifically designed for families to practice true love and patience. When illness hits, it plunges everyone into stress and exhaustion, for sure. But the source challenges us not to use that as an excuse for misery. Instead, realize this is a highly specialized training ground provided directly to you. It forces the question, what is true love? What does it actually mean to serve someone? It's a completely unique opportunity to polish your own soul. And a huge part of that training is simply returning the favor. The author reminds us that taking care of an ailing parent is a profound opportunity to return the care and the life we once received from them. Think about it. We all start out entirely dependent. Our parents sacrifice their sleep, their time, and their energy to raise us. The text suggests that stepping up to care for them in their later years is spiritually designed. It's our way to fulfill a duty of gratitude. It's literally the circle of care coming full completion. In fact, the text emphatically states that voluntarily taking on this heavy burden and enduring the hardship of caregiving is the highest possible practice of love a human can achieve. I mean, it is so easy to love someone when everything's fun and everyone is healthy, right? But to love someone when they literally cannot give anything back, when they are entirely dependent, when it's massively inconvenient and physically draining, that is the ultimate practice. The source assures us that this intense, selfless effort does not go unnoticed in the spiritual realm. By enduring this, you are engaging in the most profound act of love possible. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a rather provocative thought straight from the source material. When the time comes to care for someone you love, will you see it as a burden or as an opportunity to practice true love? It's a total game changer of a paradigm shift. Next time you're frustrated by the slow pace of an elderly parent, or you're feeling totally overwhelmed by the demands of a sick relative, just remember, there is a perfect soul inside that failing machine. Remember that your words are a literal life force. And remember that this challenging, exhausting moment is actually your ultimate spiritual training ground. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this fresh perspective brings some much-needed light to your journey.